Good afternoon, my friends. Everything around the Pittsburgh Steelers offense is starting to feel completely different right now, and one rookie is suddenly becoming impossible to ignore inside the building. While most of the attention from fans has naturally been focused on Aaron Rodgers, the quarterback room, and the new direction of this offense under Mike McCarthy, the player quietly stealing attention during OTAs has been rookie receiver Jeremy Bernard. And according to everything coming out of practice, this is not just hype created by one good day in shorts. The Steelers coaching staff, veteran players, and reporters covering the team every day are all noticing the exact same thing. This kid is learning the offense extremely fast, and he already looks far more prepared than many people expected this early in the offseason. What is making this story so interesting for Steelers fans is that Bernard is not simply making flashy catches and generating highlights for social media. The real reason people inside the organization are impressed is because of how quickly he is understanding the offense mentally. Mike McCarthy's new system is heavily built around timing, spacing, movement, and versatility. Receivers are not going to stay locked into one position. The Steelers want receivers who can line up outside, in the slot, motion across formations, and create mismatches all over the field. That requires intelligence, discipline, and the ability to process information quickly. And right now, Jeremy Bernard appears to be handling all of that better than expected for a rookie. During conversations with the media, Bernard came across as extremely humble and focused. Instead of acting like a player trying to chase headlines, he sounded like somebody completely locked in on earning trust from the coaching staff. He openly admitted that being challenged this early is something he embraces because it shows the Steelers already believe he can contribute. That is a major detail that fans should not ignore. Teams do not overload young players mentally unless they believe those players are capable of handling real responsibilities. Bernard explained that his entire approach right now is centered around learning everything possible, studying constantly, and making sure mistakes never happen twice. He talked about taking notes, reviewing material sent by coaches, walking through concepts by himself away from the facility, and preparing mentally before every practice. That answer alone probably explains why veteran players have already started praising him publicly. The Steelers clearly believe this offense will only function at its highest level if receivers can master multiple responsibilities, and Bernard is attacking that challenge aggressively. Another thing that stands out is how naturally he already seems to understand what comes with playing alongside Aaron Rodgers. Earlier this week, there were comments about how Rodgers expects precision from everyone around him. If receivers are not in the correct spot at the correct time in a West Coast offense, problems happen immediately. Timing is everything. Rodgers has always been demanding with receivers because he processes defenses so quickly, and any hesitation destroys the rhythm of a play. Bernard already seems fully aware of that reality. There have not been reports of frustration or confusion. Instead, the early signs point toward a rookie receiver who is adapting rapidly to the expectations around him. Mike McCarthy himself gave perhaps the biggest endorsement yet when talking about the younger receivers. He made it very clear that the Steelers do not want limited receivers in this offense. According to McCarthy, versatility has massive value because it forces defenses into uncomfortable situations. If a receiver can only line up in one spot, defenses can predict things more easily. But when players move all over the formation, defenses are forced to adjust constantly. That creates opportunities for mismatches, motion packages, stacks, bunch formations, and spacing advantages that stress defensive communication. And McCarthy specifically said the younger receivers are crushing it when it comes to learning those responsibilities. That statement should absolutely excite Steelers fans because it reveals what this offense is trying to become. For years, Pittsburgh's offense often looked predictable and limited, but now the organization appears determined to create a far more flexible and aggressive attack. DK Metcalf can move inside. Michael Pittman Jr. can attack different matchups. Roman Wilson can be used creatively. And now Jeremy Bernard is quickly emerging as another versatile weapon who may end up playing much earlier than expected. The interesting part is that Bernard's development is also being accelerated by the veterans around him. He specifically mentioned learning from experienced receivers who already understand how to study film, prepare weekly, and absorb an NFL playbook. That environment matters for young players. Instead of walking into a rebuilding situation with chaos everywhere, Bernard is entering a room filled with veterans who understand professional preparation. That gives him a chance to grow much faster than many rookies around the league. And honestly, the biggest takeaway from all of this may be how prepared Bernard already looks mentally. Physical talent matters in the NFL, but coaches trust players who to process information quickly and avoid repeated mistakes. Right now, that appears to be exactly what Bernard is showing during OTAs. The Steelers are installing a completely new offensive identity. Aaron Rodgers is demanding precision from everyone involved, and somehow this rookie receiver is already standing out in the middle of all of it. If this continues into training camp, Steelers fans may have to seriously start discussing the possibility that Giron Bernard becomes one of the biggest surprises on the roster this season, because right now, inside the building, the belief in him is growing very fast. And the biggest question now becomes this: if Bernard keeps developing at this pace throughout training camp, how large of a role could he actually earn in this new Steelers offense? One of the most fascinating parts of what is happening right now inside the Steelers organization is how much attention Aaron Rodgers is giving to the younger quarterbacks without actually trying to become their full-time teacher. And honestly, the way Rodgers explained the situation tells you everything about how this quarterback room is being built moving forward. When he was asked about mentoring Will Howard and Drew Aller, Rodgers joked that mentoring is not in my job description, referencing the relationship he once had with Brett Favre in Green Bay. But after saying that, he immediately made it clear that he absolutely wants to help the young quarterbacks as much as they are willing to learn. That detail matters because this is not going to be a situation where Rodgers constantly holds their hands or treats them like assistants. Instead, this feels much more like an opportunity where the younger quarterbacks have direct access to one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history, and now it becomes their responsibility to absorb everything possible from him. And according to everything being discussed around OTAs, both Will Howard and Drew Aller appear extremely eager to do exactly that. Will Howard already spent time around Rodgers last season while recovering from injury, and every time he spoke publicly, he talked about how valuable that experience was. Now Drew Aller enters the room with the exact same opportunity in front of him. For Steelers fans, this could become one of the most important long-term storylines of the entire season because everyone understands what Pittsburgh is trying to build beyond 2026. Rodgers himself admitted this is likely his final ride in the NFL. He is a future Hall of Famer, a 4-time MVP, and one of the smartest quarterbacks the game has ever seen when it comes to reading defenses. Even at this stage of his career, his understanding of coverages, blitz disguises, timing, and adjustments remains elite. Younger quarterbacks simply do not get opportunities like this very often. Most young players spend their early careers learning behind average veterans or backup level quarterbacks. But Howard and Aller are sitting behind a player who mastered the mental side of football at the highest possible level for more than 2 decades. And the Steelers coaching staff clearly understands how valuable that can become. Mike McCarthy openly encouraged players to use Rodgers as a resource. That applies especially to Howard and Aller because both quarterbacks still have major areas they need to improve before anyone can realistically view them as future NFL starters. One of the biggest concerns surrounding both players has been footwork and processing speed. In college, those issues can sometimes be hidden by athletic ability or simplified offensive systems. In the NFL, those weaknesses get exposed immediately. Rodgers has spent his entire career building some of the cleanest mechanics and quickest processing in football, watching how he prepares, how he studies film, how he diagnoses defenses before the snap, and how he communicates adjustments could completely change the way these younger quarterbacks approach the game mentally. There was also discussion during OTAs about how difficult the transition from college football to the NFL truly is for quarterbacks. Drew Aller, for example, occasionally struggled at Penn State when defenses disguised coverages or changed looks late before the snap. In the NFL, defensive coordinators attack quarterbacks mentally every single play. Rodgers built a legendary career partly because of how quickly he recognizes defensive intentions. He often identifies blitzes before they happen and immediately attacks the weakness created by that pressure. Those are not things easily taught in a classroom. Those are habits developed through years of experience, preparation, and repetition. And this is where the Steelers probably see enormous value in the current quarterback room setup. Even if Rodgers only plays one final season in Pittsburgh, the younger quarterbacks now get an entire year learning directly behind him while also developing inside Mike McCarthy's offense. That experience alone could accelerate their growth significantly. What makes this even more interesting is that the organization does not appear ready to fully commit to either Howard or Aller as the future franchise quarterback yet. In fact, there was strong discussion during OTAs that Pittsburgh Pittsburgh will very likely continue exploring quarterback options in future drafts, unless one of these young players develops far faster than expected. That means Howard and Aller are not simply competing to become backups. They are fighting to prove they deserve long-term investment from the organization. The Steelers seem to envision a future where they eventually draft another quarterback early, while surrounding that player with a room full of young quarterbacks who already have developmental experience inside the system. Imagine a future quarterback room containing a first-round rookie, Drew Aller entering his second or third season with experience behind Rodgers, and Will Howard continuing to grow with multiple years inside the organization. That creates competition, depth, and developmental flexibility all at once. But none of that becomes possible unless these younger quarterbacks maximize the opportunity sitting directly in front of them right now. Rodgers is not going to force-feed them lessons every day. He already made that clear. However, if they are willing to ask questions, study his habits, learn his preparation methods, and absorb the way he sees the game, this season could become incredibly important for their futures. Meanwhile, another young offensive player quietly trying to rebuild confidence during these OTAs is Caleb Johnson, and honestly, his situation may be even more important than many fans realize. After struggling last season and falling into Mike Tomlin's doghouse following costly mental mistakes, Johnson now enters a completely different offensive environment under Mike McCarthy. The Steelers still believe in his talent, but time is starting to become very important for his development. The question now is whether this new offense and coaching staff can finally unlock the version of Caleb Johnson the Steelers believed they were drafting out of Iowa, or whether Pittsburgh eventually starts looking for another young running back to take his place. What do you think the Steelers should do if Caleb Johnson struggles again this season? Caleb Johnson may not be receiving the same headlines right now as Aaron Rodgers, Jaron Bernard, or the quarterback competition, but internally the Steelers probably understand that his development could become one of the quiet factors that determines how dangerous this offense actually becomes later in the season. Because when you really look at the structure of Mike McCarthy's offense and how the Steelers are rebuilding their identity, they need multiple running backs they can trust. And at this moment, Johnson is standing at a crossroads in his career. The talent has never really been the question. When the Steelers drafted him out of Iowa, they believed they were getting a physical runner with upside who